The late afternoon sun was heavy in the sky, its golden rays stretching lazily over the small-town gas station. Cars bustled down the adjacent highway, and a steady breeze rustled the nearby trees. At pump number 8, Michael Hayes, a retired Army veteran, stood staring at the digital numbers on the gas pump as they ticked upward. His old sedan, a rusting but functional relic of his earlier years, sat silently, its paint chipped and faded. The tank was far from full, but Michael was hesitant to keep the nozzle in for even one more second. He released the lever and placed the nozzle back on the pump with a heavy sigh. His heart sank as he glanced at the total $17. It was all he could afford, but it wouldn't be enough to get him through the week. Michael had been stretching every dollar as far as it could go, relying on odd jobs and a modest veteran's pension that barely covered his rent. Every expense felt like a mountain, and lately his old car had been demanding more than its fair share. Reaching into his wallet, Michael pulled out a worn, folded bill and a handful of coins. His hand trembled as he counted the change to ensure he had enough to cover the purchase. He felt the sting of embarrassment as a family at the next pump chattered happily, filling their shiny new SUV without a second thought. Michael clenched his jaw and turned away. He didn't begrudge them their comfort, but it made his struggles feel sharper, more exposed. After handing the cashier his money, he returned to his car, his mind a whirl of stress. He had been skipping meals to save what little money he could, and his stomach growled in protest as he sat down in the driver's seat. As he rested his hands on the steering wheel, a tap on his window startled him. Michael turned to see a man standing there, his expression kind but unreadable. The man looked to be in his early 40s, wearing a casual flannel shirt and jeans. Michael hesitated but rolled down the window just enough to hear him. "Hey there," the man said, his voice friendly but calm. "I noticed you didn't fill up all the way. Do you mind if I help you out?" Michael blinked, taken aback. "That's kind of you, but I'm fine," he said quickly, his voice strained. "Really?" The man didn't move. "I've been there before," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Please let me cover the rest. No strings attached." Michael felt his throat tighten. He wanted to refuse, to insist he could handle it, but the weight of the past few months, the sleepless nights, the mounting bills, the constant juggling act pressed down on him all at once. Before he could say another word, the man walked over to the pump, swiped his card, and began filling Michael's tank. Michael stepped out of the car, his emotions raw. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't even know you." The man smiled. "That's the point. Sometimes we all just need a little help." As the pump clicked, signaling the tank was full, Michael felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He tried to thank the stranger, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, his chest heaved and tears began to stream down his face. It wasn't just gratitude, it was the release of months, even years, of struggle, frustration, and exhaustion. "I'm sorry," Michael said, wiping at his eyes. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," the man said gently, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. "It's okay." The small, simple gesture broke something open in Michael. He leaned against his car, letting the tears flow. The stranger stayed quiet, giving him the space he needed. When Michael finally found his voice, he looked at the man and said, "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," the man replied. "Just pay it forward when you can." Michael nodded, the words settling deep in his heart. As the man returned to his own car and drove away, Michael stood by his sedan, staring at the full tank and feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He didn't know it yet, but this small act of kindness was about to change the course of his life in ways he never expected. The stranger's kindness lingered in Michael's mind as he drove home. The full tank of gas was more than a convenience, it was a lifeline. For weeks he had been teetering on the edge, wondering how much longer he could scrape by. Now, with a little breathing room, he felt a flicker of possibility. Michael's apartment was modest and tidy. though it bore the unmistakable signs of financial strain: a stack of unopened bills on the kitchen table, a fridge stocked with little more than bread and condiments, and the faint chill of a heater set too low to save on electricity. He sat down at the table, staring at the bills. He knew he couldn't ignore them much longer, but for tonight, he allowed himself a moment of relief. The stranger's words echoed in his head: "Pay it forward when you can." The next morning, Michael woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds. He brewed a pot of coffee and thought about the long to-do list waiting for him. His most pressing task was finding more work. He had been doing odd jobs for months: painting fences, fixing small appliances, anything that brought in a little extra cash, but the work was inconsistent. Scrolling through online job postings, Michael stumbled upon something that caught his eye: drivers needed for community outreach program. The ad explained that a local nonprofit was looking for veterans to transport supplies and deliver meals to homebound seniors. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady, and the opportunity to serve others appealed to him. Michael called the number listed and was greeted by a cheerful woman named Clara. "We'd love to have you stop by for an interview," she said after a brief conversation. "Can you come this afternoon?" For the first time in a while, Michael felt a surge of optimism. "I'll be there," he replied. The nonprofit's office was located in a converted community center on the edge of town. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, with volunteers bustling about and cheerful voices filling the air. Michael introduced himself at the front desk and was quickly led to Clara's office. Clara, a middle-aged woman with a bright smile and a firm handshake, invited him to sit. "Thank you for coming in," she said. "We're always looking for people who understand the value of service. Can you tell me a little about your background?" Michael hesitated for a moment, then began to share. He talked about his years in the army, his transition to civilian life, and the challenges he'd faced trying to find stable work. As he spoke, Clara listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. "I won't sugarcoat it," Michael said, his voice steady but subdued. "The past few years haven't been easy. But I'm ready to work, and I want to make a difference where I can." Clara smiled. "I think you're exactly what we're looking for," she said. "Let me show you around." By the end of the day, Michael had secured the job. His first assignment would be delivering meals to a nearby neighborhood. The pay wasn't enough to solve all his problems overnight, but it was a step forward. As he left the office, he couldn't help but think of the stranger at the gas station. That one act of kindness had propelled him into action, and now he had the chance to do the same for others. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Michael quickly found his rhythm, loading his car with boxes of meals and following the routes provided by the nonprofit. At each stop, he was greeted by seniors who were often just as grateful for the conversation as they were for the food. One afternoon, he delivered a meal to a woman named Ruth, who lived alone in a small, weathered house. As he handed her the food, she smiled warmly and said, "It's nice to see a friendly face. Sometimes the days feel so long." Michael paused, her words striking a chord. "I know what you mean," he said. "But you're not alone. People care about you." Ruth's eyes glistened with tears as she thanked him. Driving away, Michael felt a profound sense of purpose. The job was more than a paycheck; it was a chance to connect, to make others feel seen and valued. As the weeks went by, Michael began to notice changes in himself. He wasn't just scraping by anymore; he was finding meaning in his work and pride in his ability to help others. But more than that, he was beginning to rebuild his confidence and his belief in the goodness of people. One evening, as he sat in his apartment reflecting on how far he'd come, Michael thought again of the stranger who had paid for his gas. That simple gesture had set so much in motion. He knew he would never forget it. And he knew, deep down, that he wasn't done paying it forward. What Michael didn't realize was that his journey was far from over, and the connections he was forging now would soon lead to something even greater. Michael's routine began to stabilize. His job at the nonprofit gave him purpose and introduced him to a community of people who shared his desire to make a difference. Slowly but surely, he was getting back on his feet. Each paycheck helped him chip away at his bills, and he even managed to save a little. For the first time in years, he felt like he had control over his life. One afternoon, Clara approached him with a new opportunity. "Michael, you've been doing an incredible job," she said. "We've got a big project coming up, a food drive and supply distribution for veterans. We could really use someone with your experience to help organize it." Michael hesitated. While he enjoyed delivering meals, leading an event felt like a big step. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that," he said. Clara smiled, her voice steady but encouraging. "You're exactly the right person. You understand what these veterans are going through because you've been there. That kind of connection makes all the difference." Michael thought about her words. He remembered the strangers who had stepped in to help him, the man at the gas station, the community at the nonprofit, and realized this was his chance to do the same for others. "Okay," he said, nodding. "I'll do it." Planning the food drive was no small task. Michael spent hours coordinating with local businesses, organizing volunteers, and spreading the word. As the event approached, he began to feel a growing sense of anticipation. The day of the drive dawned clear and bright. The community center buzzed with activity as volunteers unpacked boxes of food and supplies. Veterans began arriving early, some alone, others with their families. Michael greeted each one, his handshake firm and his smile genuine. As the day went on, he found himself drawn to the stories of the people he met. One man, a fellow Army veteran named Carlos, spoke about the challenges of finding stable work after leaving the service. Another, a single mother who had served in the Navy, shared how she had been relying on food pantries to make ends meet. "It's tough out there," Carlos said, "but seeing something like this gives me hope." Michael nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection. "You're not alone," he said. "There are people who care. And things can get better." Toward the end of the event, Michael noticed a man standing off to the side, his hands in his pockets. He looked familiar, but Michael couldn't quite place him. As Michael approached, the man turned and smiled. "Remember me?" the man asked. Michael's breath caught. It was the stranger from the gas station. "You," Michael said, his voice filled with emotion. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." The man chuckled. "I wasn't sure I'd see you either, but I heard about this event and thought I'd stop by. Looks like you've been busy." Michael shook his head, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you. What you did for me that day, it changed everything." The man's expression softened. "You've already thanked me. Look at everything you've done since. You're paying it forward in ways I never could have imagined." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. He thought back to the moment at the gas station, how lost he had felt, and how that simple act of kindness had set so much in motion. "You have no idea how much that meant to me," he said. "I think I do," the man replied. "And now you're doing the same for others. That's what it's all about." As the event wound down, Michael watched as volunteers packed up supplies and veterans loaded their cars with food and donations. The atmosphere was one of camaraderie and hope, a reminder that no one had to face their struggles alone. Driving home that evening, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. He thought about the chain of kindness that had brought him to this moment, the stranger at the gas station, Clara's encouragement, the community that had embraced him. Each link in the chain had led to something greater. But Michael also knew this wasn't the end of the story. There were more people to help, more opportunities to give back, and more ways to keep the chain going. What he didn't realize was that his journey was about to take another unexpected turn, one that would expand his impact in ways he couldn't yet imagine. A few weeks after the food drive, Michael was back at his regular delivery route. It was a quiet afternoon, and the streets were bathed in the soft glow of autumn sunlight. He had just finished delivering a meal to Ruth, the elderly woman who often shared kind words and heartfelt stories, when his phone buzzed with a call from Clara. "Michael, I just got off the phone with the local news station," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "They want to interview you about the food drive. They heard about how you've been helping veterans in the community, and they think your story is inspiring." Michael felt his stomach flip. He wasn't one for the spotlight, and the idea of being on TV made him uneasy. "I don't know, Clara," he said. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that." "You are the right person," Clara replied firmly. "You've been through the struggle, and you've turned it into something good. People need to hear that. It's not about you, it's about showing others that there's hope." Michael took a deep breath. Clara was right, as usual. "All right," he said, "I'll do it." The following week, a reporter and a cameraman arrived at the community center to interview Michael. They asked him about his time in the military, his struggles after leaving the service, and how he had found his way to the nonprofit. Michael spoke honestly, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "What inspired you to get involved in helping others?" the reporter asked. Michael thought for a moment, then smiled. "It all started with a stranger at a gas station," he said. He recounted the story of the man who had paid for his gas when he was at his lowest point, and how that simple act of kindness had set him on a path of change. "After that, I realized how much a small gesture can mean to someone," Michael continued. "I wanted to be that person for someone else, and now I'm lucky enough to be part of a community that believes in lifting each other up." The interview aired the next evening, and Michael didn't think much of it until his phone started buzzing with calls and messages. Friends, former colleagues, and even strangers reached out to tell him how much his story had resonated with them. The ripple effect of the interview was far greater than Michael could have imagined. Donations poured into the nonprofit, and local businesses offered to sponsor future events. But what moved Michael most were the letters and emails from veterans who shared their own stories of struggle and hope. One letter in particular stood out. It was from a man named Aaron, who wrote about how he had been on the verge of losing his home when a neighbor stepped in to help. "Your story reminded me of the kindness I've experienced," Aaron wrote. "It's easy to forget there's still good in the world, but you've inspired me to look for ways to give back." Michael felt a deep sense of gratitude as he read the letter. He realized that the chain of kindness was continuing to grow, reaching people he had never met and sparking acts of generosity he would never witness. A month later, Clara surprised Michael with an announcement at a staff meeting. "Because of all the work you've done and the impact you've had, the board has decided to create a new position, Veteran Outreach Coordinator. And we want you to take the role." Michael was stunned. The position would allow him to focus full-time on supporting veterans, organizing events, and expanding the nonprofit's reach. It was more than a job, it was a chance to dedicate his life to a cause he cared deeply about. "Thank you," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd end up here, but I'm grateful every day for this opportunity." As Michael settled into his new role, he often thought about the stranger at the gas station. He wished he could thank the man again, to let him know just how far that one act of kindness had gone. What Michael didn't know was that the stranger was also thinking of him, proud of the transformation he had witnessed. The chain of kindness wasn't just continuing, it was growing stronger, touching more lives than either of them could have imagined. And for Michael, this was only the beginning of what he hoped to accomplish. Months passed, and Michael flourished in his role as Veteran Outreach Coordinator. The nonprofit expanded its programs, and with Michael at the helm, new initiatives were launched to address housing, job training, and mental health support for veterans. His days were busy, but they were also filled with purpose. Every event, every connection with a struggling veteran, reminded Michael of why he had started this journey. The holidays were approaching, and Michael proposed organizing a special event, a Thanksgiving dinner for veterans and their families. Clara and the board loved the idea, and soon, the community center was abuzz with preparations. Volunteers decorated the space, donations poured in, and Michael personally reached out to veterans who might otherwise spend the holiday alone. On Thanksgiving Day, the community center was alive with the sound of laughter and conversation. Long tables were filled with plates of turkey, stuffing, and pie, and the air was warm with a sense of togetherness. Michael moved through the room, greeting guests and making sure everyone felt welcome. As the evening wound down, Michael noticed a familiar figure near the entrance. His breath caught as he realized it was the stranger from the gas station. The man was standing quietly, his hands in his pockets, observing the scene with a soft smile. Michael approached him, his heart pounding. "You came," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The man nodded. "I heard about the dinner and thought I'd stop by. Looks like it's a big success." Michael shook his head, his gratitude spilling over. "This wouldn't have happened without you. That day at the gas station, you have no idea what you started." The man smiled. "I think I do. But the credit's not mine. You took that moment and turned it into something much bigger." Michael felt tears welling in his eyes. "I've been wanting to tell you. You saved me that day. I was at the end of my rope. You gave me hope when I had none." The man placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "That's the power of kindness. It doesn't just help, it inspires. And look at what you've done since. You've made a difference in so many lives." Michael nodded, overwhelmed. The stranger stayed for the rest of the evening, sharing stories with the veterans and joining in the celebration. As the night came to a close, Michael stood by the door, watching as families hugged goodbye and volunteers cleaned up. His heart was full. The Thanksgiving dinner became an annual tradition, growing larger each year. Michael continued to lead the nonprofit with the same dedication and compassion that had brought him to this point. He often reflected on the chain of kindness that had changed his life: the stranger at the gas station, the encouragement of Clara, and the countless people who had supported him along the way. Years later, Michael was invited to speak at a national conference for veteran support organizations. As he stood on stage, looking out at the audience, he began his speech with the story of the stranger who had paid for his gas. "That moment," Michael said, his voice steady, "wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a spark. It reminded me that even in our darkest moments there's light, and that light can grow if we share it with others." The room erupted in applause, and Michael felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His journey had come full circle, and he was living proof of the transformative power of compassion. Michael's life became a testament to the ripple effect of kindness. The stranger's small act at the gas station had set off a chain reaction that changed countless lives. Through his work, Michael ensured that the chain would never end. In the end, it wasn't just about paying it forward. It was about building a legacy of hope, one small act at a time.